Right, here are your notes for section 7.5, rational exponents and radicals. Go ahead and fill in the date that you're working on this up here so you have a reference for yourself. Okay, rational exponents and radicals are exponents that are represented by a rational number, which is a fraction right there. Okay, some examples of some rational exponents are 9 to the 1/2 power. All these right here, 64 to the 2/3, x to the 1/2, and 10x to the 2/5. When we're working with radicals and rational exponents in radical form, they're interchangeable. So we've got a to the m over n power. We can rewrite that as the nth root of a to the m. So this m on top becomes the power, and the n on the bottom becomes the root. So that's when we're writing it in that in the root, and we can write this also the nth root of a to the mth power in parentheses as well. So the root is always on the bottom. Think of it kind of being in the ground, and then the power is pretty powerful. It's going to be on the top. To convert from a rational exponent, from the numerator it stays in the base and the denominator gets placed at the root of the radical. So we're just going to do some examples right here of writing it in radical form. So again, remember that 3 becomes the power and that 2 is the root. So this actually becomes the square root of 25 to the 3rd power, and we can simplify that even more. We know the square root of 25, that's 5, and then 5 to the 3rd power is 125. All right, using that same rule again, we're going to rewrite this as the 3rd root of 8 to the 4th power. 8 is one of those numbers that we should be able to recognize what the 3rd root is. That's actually 2. And then 2 to the 4th power, and write that up here, that is 16. All right, so by simplifying that, it becomes something that's much nicer to look at, both of those. All right, so go ahead and try those real quick on your own. So the root is the number on the bottom, and that power is that powerful. Go ahead and try those. Right, so this is going to be the cubed root of 27 to the 2nd power. 27 is again one of those numbers you want to look at. The cubed root of 27 is 3. 3 to the 2nd power is 9. 16 then should have been the 4th root of 16 to the 5th power. The 4th root of 16 is equal to 2. 2 to the 5th power is one of those that you should remember pretty quick too. That's 32. All right, the next examples, we're going to go back the other way. We're going to take them from that radical form into that rational form, so writing it in the power with the exponents. So this becomes 27. Remember that power is that top number. It's pretty powerful. It's 2 over 3, so 27 to the 2/3 power. Next one might be a little tricky. We have to look at that one. When it's just the square root, that root then is 2. We just don't write it because that's one of those ones you see all the time. So this becomes 25 to the 3/2 power. And again, changing that, that root is that base of that fraction, and that power 3 is that top of that fraction. Okay, we're going to use these rules of simplifying with our examples down here. And by using those interchangeable forms, we can make those problems a little bit more simple to deal with. So for this one, I'm going to look at the 4th root of 81. I can actually take the 4th root of 81. On your calculators you can do that, but again, that's one of those ones you want to be able to look at and remember. The 4th root of 81 is actually 3. So that becomes 3 squared. The 4th root of 16 is one of those you should recognize. That's 2. That becomes 2 to the 3rd power. So this becomes 9 times 6, which is 54. All right. Looking at the next one, again, taking the square root of something and then taking that simplified power. So the square root of 64 is 8 times the cubed root of 64. That's one of those ones that you should recognize. That's going to be 4, and then 4 squared. So 8 times 16, which I don't have a calculator here, so that's 80 plus 48, so 128. Double check me on your calculators, but I think that is 128 right there. I'm going to go back up to number 2 then. Again, using those rules of exponents that we know, I'm going to take that square root of 64 first. That becomes 8 to the 4th times the cubed root of 64. We just did that one. That's 4. Again, that's going to be 4 squared. I'll show you two different ways with this one. That 8 to the 4th power is really big, and I don't have a calculator right here handy with me, so you can go ahead and do that on your calculator. Might be 1096, I don't know for sure. But 8 to the 4th times 16 then, because 4 squared is 16, you guys can get that answer on your calculator. The other way to look at this problem, I'm going to kind of draw my arrow up here, is if I changed it into fractional exponents. So this would be 64 to the 4 second power times 64 to the 2/3 power. I can actually then add those exponents up. So this actually becomes to the second power. So then I've got 64 to the 2 2/3 power. Changing that to an improper fraction, that's 3 times 2 is 6 plus 2 is 8 over 3. Simplifying that again back into radical, I can take the third root of 64 to the 8th power, so that actually becomes 4 to the 8th power, which should be the same answer that you got when you took that 8 to the 4th power times 16. All right, looking at the next one, number 4 here, I am going to go change those. So this becomes 100 to the 3/4 power times 100 to the 4 seconds power. Again, that 4 over 2 simplifies into 2. So then it becomes 100 to the 2 3/4 power, which is actually 11 over 4. 4. So I'm going to write this down here, 2 3/4 as an improper fraction. If you can't remember, it's 2 times 4 plus 3 makes that 11 over 4. All right, number 5, we're going to use the rules that we already know for our exponents. This is a power to a power. When we have those two powers, we multiply those. So this is going to be n to the, and this is 4 over 1 times 3 over 2. So that becomes, move this n over here for you, that becomes n to the 12 over 2, which reduces to n to the 6th. All right, for this one, I'm going to look at the numbers that I've got in front of my variables. So 3 times 1 is 3. I'm going to use my rule of exponents here. I've got two powers, so the bases are the same, so I'm going to add my powers. 1/4 plus 3/4 is actually 1, so this simplifies into 3 times b. All right, and the last two here, I'm going to use that power to the power, remembering that 64 actually has an exponent of 1. So this becomes 64 to the 3/2, because 1 times 3/2 is 3/2, times m to the 12/2, again, because just like up here, that was 4 over 1 times 3 over 2. I'm going to make this 64 to the 3/2 power. I'm going to actually rewrite that with my radical form. So that's the square root of 64 to the 3rd power. We know what the square root of 64 is. That's 8. So 8 to the 3rd power times m to the 6th is my final answer. You could do that 8 to the 3rd power. Again, I don't have my calculator handy with me right now. It's a pretty large number. Last example here, it's 8 to the 2/3 over 8 to the 1/2. Using my rules of exponents, I have a quotient, so I'm going to subtract my exponents. So this becomes 8 to the 2/3 minus 1/2. Good fraction practice here. In order to subtract those fractions, I have to have a common denominator. Make that denominator 6. To get from 3 to 6, I multiplied that by, that's a 2 over 3. I multiplied that by 2, so I have to multiply the top by 2, so that becomes 4 over 6. For the 1/2, I multiplied that by 3 on the bottom, so I have to multiply that by 3 on the top. So that becomes 3/6. Now I can do that subtraction. So that becomes, give me some room here, 8 to the 4 minus 3 is 1 over 6. Leave that like that. I can't take the 6th root. If I wanted to kind of interchange that, that's the 6th root of 8 to the 1st power. So big key concepts here is you have to know how to move from fractions, exponential, or exponents that are fractions. So x to the 2/3, we're going to move that into radical form. That's the 3rd root of x squared. And by doing that, sometimes when we were working on these problems right here, notice that you did have some numbers that you could simplify, such as that 64 to the 2/3 power. That's the 3rd root of 64 squared. That 3rd root of 64 is 4. That's one of those common ones. And then 4 squared is 16. All right, you've got your practice worksheet on the next page. Go ahead and take that out and work on it.